Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the most terrifying thing you've seen in the woods at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was solo camping and was on a hike to my favorite spot. I saw what looked like a man holding a massive rock in one hand and a knife in the other, facing me. This was pretty weird, but other bushcrafters have been known to camp there too, so I gave the standard, "Hey man," shout and wave. I got a bit closer, and it looked like it was just a rock. I laughed it off and turned around, starting to walk away. A rock whizzed by my right ear fast enough and big enough to really hurt me if it had hit me. I turned around to where the rock had come from, and the figure I'd seen wasn't there anymore. When I was young, like maybe 9 or 10, my cousin and I were walking down beside my grandparents' house. At the edge of the woods was their pig pen. The back fence bordered the woods and was heavily overgrown with bushes. There was a small path we had worn out and a very small clearing where we had put some chairs. It was kind of a natural clubhouse. Once you were in that tiny clearing, you couldn't see in or out of it. We were walking down the little path, and just before we got to the clearing, I could see someone, an adult, sitting in one of the chairs, kind of leaned over with his hands on his head. I turned around and ran over to my cousin, getting out of there. She ran behind me, asking what's wrong. I didn't stop running till I got back to my grandparents' house. I told my granddad, and we all went back down there, but when we got back, he was gone. The thing is that even at that age we had to duck down to get into the clearing. A full-grown adult would have to crawl hands and knees to get in or out of the clearing. I have no idea how anyone even noticed the entrance to the path. It was so discreet. I also have no idea how he was able to get out of there before we got back. I'm 46, and I can still see the image of him sitting there like it was yesterday. My friend and I were walking home from school one day. We took a different path than usual, and we stumbled upon someone's house. It was one of those isolated homes surrounded by forest on all sides. I noticed something white on the edge of the lawn as we passed. I took a look at it, and it looked like a half of a human pelvis. I asked my friend who hunted what he thought, and he said it didn't look like a deer or coyote. As we were studying it, the homeowner storms out of his house and starts to chase us. And I mean really chase us, for a good half-mile or so, until we lost him. It was more than just trying to chase us away. I think he was trying to get us. We never told anyone at the time. I tell the story now, over a decade later, and people think I'm bullshitting. I just hope my friend was wrong, and the guy was just an effing loon with an animal bone on his lawn. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that he was trying to get you. I don't think he wanted to have you over for tea. Maybe for dinner. When I was younger, we would go camping at a place called Bear Creek in Tennessee. The campsite we got was always the best, as my grandfather was best friends with the owner of the place where you could camp. The place backed up into nothing but miles of woods, with your nearest neighbor like 2 to 3 miles away. Anyways, at our campground, we had a big-ass creek with a bridge overhead. Well, on the third day we were there, I remember everyone being around the fire and me wandering off through the bridge. There, on the other side, were a group of black-robed people staring back at me. They just stared, no faces being shown. One had a knife of some kind, while another motioned for me to come over with them. When they started over the bridge towards me, I ran back and my family grabbed their guns and started to point at them. They calmly went back over the bridge and never saw them again. It's not what I saw, it's what I didn't see. Years ago, I decided to go hunting. Thing is, I don't really like hunting, but I do enjoy target shooting, and really just wanted an excuse to walk around the woods. I didn't expect to see anything, and I'd never gone alone before. I was fairly familiar with the area, though I hadn't been there much, and I kept getting this weird feeling I was being watched. I kept going up this trail and a little bit out of it, and the feeling I was being watched was getting weirder as it felt stronger. Nobody was in the area, probably wasn't anyone for at least a mile, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Then I felt really odd, like I was in a vacuum or something. I don't know how to explain it. I realized there were no sounds. I didn't feel any breeze anymore, nothing. No birds chirping, no random swaying sounds of leaves or branches, no squirrels chattering, nothing. Extremely odd for this area. I suddenly had this impending sense of doom, and I literally ran the hell out of the woods for a full mile or so, got into my car and left. I still don't know what happened. It may have been me just freaking out to a very bizarre quietness and stillness, but I don't think it was. Something odd was happening there, and while I wasn't in the area, there's a giant forest area in my state where tons of people over the past 200 years have disappeared without a trace, and people report feeling weird and seeing or noticing strange things. I wasn't even thinking about that at the time or after, but something weird was happening, and I wanted to get the F out fast. In high school, I had a 4x4 truck, and we used to go find new trails to hang out on the weekends. One day, my friend, who was a huge stoner, and I found an amazing plateau in the middle of the woods. It was a perfect little spot to invite friends, back up tailgates to a campfire, etc. My friend and I decided to sit on the tailgate and smoke a blunt to celebrate our new find. As we were sitting there, getting really high, we started to hear horror movie sounds. We looked at each other and realized we both heard it for what it sounded like. Then we heard what sounded like a chainsaw coming toward us, so we bolted for the truck ready to GTFO there. Because of the shadows of the trees at that point of the day, I couldn't tell which way we came in, so I blazed a fresh path out and found a trail we didn't recognize. I went left. We came to a fork in the road, and I went right, which dead-ended at a long, tall wooden fence. My friend got out of the truck and walked towards me with big, quite certain that's how he'll die. He got back into the truck. On the other side of that fence was a house being built. The horror noises were hammering, and they were cutting wood, which all sounded like straight-up horror movie shit due to the lay of the hills and the fact that we were at a high point. The acoustics just happened to sound that way. We still laugh about that when we see each other. When I was about 13 to 14, me and some friends went camping somewhere in the center of England for 2 days, and we were basically effing miles from any footpath or road. First night was fine, and we had breakfast and just kinda chilled for the whole day doing nothing when we went walking, and after maybe 2 to 3 miles of walking, I found a deer that had been torn to effing shreds, like to the point where you could barely tell it was a deer. We turned around and went back to camp just discussing this and our dumb theories as to what killed it and such. Fast forward to that night, and my friends are being dumb and throwing deodorant cans into the fire to blow them up, right next to a flammable effing tent. And I'm the last one to go to bed at 4 a.m. I'm also the first to wake up at around 7, and we find 2 more torn to shred deer just past our fire. We packed up and left immediately because there wasn't anything that would kill 2 bucks in those woods, so we still have no clue what it was. One fall night, I found myself on a call with little information. Caller had noticed an old fleet-side pickup truck parked off a country road. They also reported a horrible smell. Arrived on scene and immediately noticed the horrible smell. We spot a banged-up tailgate poking out of some underbrush just off the road. Worked around the driver's side and saw that the windows are blacked out. Flies began bouncing off us from all directions. I grabbed the door handle, popped the button in, and pull. I was stepping away from the truck as the door swung open, but the smell still hammered me in the face. Flies everywhere. My partner shines his light into the cab, and we see dark, grimy clothing draped over a human shape. It was my first experience with a deceased individual. Luckily, my only one where the decomp was advanced. The remaining skin was slouching, making it difficult to approximate much about the person before death. There was an outline of human putrefaction on the cloth seats. The windows, which I assumed were covered with black bags, were actually layered with black film from the breakdown. The sight of the face was horrific. Imagine an organic abstract statue being peeled by gravity. In high school, we did a cross-country meet between the other parochial schools, and this was kind of out of the way a bit and a drive into the woods. These league meets were every other Tuesday, and you won based on how the team did every week, with the points added up at the end of the season. So the course was just always set up because we were there so often, and we didn't go over this course because the race, we just warmed up and started. And then one day, we were racing through the woods and passing by dozens of large stuffed animals, dolls, and other children's toys hanging by their necks, suspended from the trees, covered in red paint, what we were told, some impaled with sticks, broken glass, and pipes. The race was 2 laps. They stopped us after the first and canceled to clean it up. We didn't go to those meets anymore. I'm going from memory here. It was decades ago. but I remember quite vividly stumbling on an old house that was falling down into the first floor. Some of the side walls, none of the roof, all pancaked down into the first floor. And I remember thinking, oh right, if I follow the wall around to the right and get behind the house, there will be stairs going down and a door to the basement. And I walk around the house and there's the stairs and the door. I walked down the stairs and knocked on the door. A moment later, I hear some scrabbling on the other side, like locks are being undone, and someone muttering, "Don't go just yet, don't go just yet." And all of a sudden, it dawned on me where I was and what I was doing, and I ran the hell out of there, still hearing someone on the other side trying to get that door open. Appalachia, man, don't wander far, not worth it. Was hiking once with a couple of friends at night, around 3 a.m. It was in an area that wasn't public woods, just middle of nowhere. It was by a lake. We pull up in my car to a long gravel road big enough for one car, and that's it. Big ditches on both sides, full of water. We start to walk around, and we see a light on in the distance. Shouldn't be any houses anywhere near. Woods should have been empty, so we decided to head towards it. We walk for about 30 minutes and start seeing like bed sheets or just big squares of fabric. They were hanging from trees by ropes, appearing randomly and very dirty. Odd, but they seem to lead towards the light, and we head forward. We get to the top of a hill. There's a circle of sheets hanging around the top of the hill. In the middle was a chair, a machete, knife, and an ice pick. We're getting a little creeped out, so we grab the weapons and decide to head back. The light was still far away. Seemed like it never got closer, actually. We swear we could hear footsteps behind us. I was in the back. We hear in the distance some water splashing, like a big rock was falling in, like the big deep splash you would hear. We keep stopping, checking around us with our phone flashlights, trying to hear where the splash noises were coming from, if the footsteps we heard would stop. We get about 5 minutes away from my car. We hear footsteps. We stop and just listen. A few seconds passed and the splash noise happened right next to us. I look and the water was not moving. Nothing fell in. We didn't know what made the noise, but we start sprinting back to the car. The light disappeared. We get to the car and I floor it backwards down the road and couldn't turn around due to the ditches on both sides. We kept all the weapons and I don't know what the sheets were, what made the water sound, what happened right next to us, or what the light was, and how it disappeared, and we never got closer to it after 30 minutes of walking. Oh well, we lived. So you're hiking at 3 a.m. in a desolate part of the woods. You find weapons, and you hear noises. You're lucky you got out of there alive, but pretty wild nonetheless. Not in the woods, but pretty close. I have woods around the back and sides of my house. I saw this tall thing with big glowing eyes that didn't make a sound on loose gravel, and none of the dogs in the immediate area, not even my dog, whom I was walking around the house to do his business before he went to bed, barked at it until I spoke. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me because I often would see things in the dark where the light didn't hit that weren't there, so I dismissed it as such when it was moving up the driveway by the well. Then, about 2 minutes later, I saw some legs moving, so I thought it was a stray dog because there are a lot of them that are in the neighborhood that vista my house, so I yelled, "Get out of here, get!" like I do for stray dogs when it stopped and looked at me. The way it moved was like a horse would when it turns, by the height and placement of the eyes were way off to be a horse, not to mention the eyes were glowing. If anyone isn't aware about how you can tell a predator from prey animals, it's all in the placement of the eyes. A prey animal will have eyes on the side of the head and only glow when light is shined into them, while the predator will have eyes in the front of the head that will glow regardless of light being shined in them or not. I do love that part of America, but I have to say that if I was accosted by a person with an axe, I'm pretty much done with that as well. So I was in the California Sierras, and my dad's friend, basically my uncle, owns the land over there, so we went for a night hike with around 13 people. Keep in mind most of us were experienced campers and were aware of the weed growers up there, so since there are obvious dangers of the night, we brought flashlights and 2 9mm handguns. We went up this giant hill, like huge, and when we finally got up there, there was only a thin trail. We continued, and suddenly I got a very, very bad feeling, like something was going down. and literally 3 minutes later, we hear 3 consecutive gunshots, then an insane laugh, followed by running around the trail. We started to run back, and I was in the front of the back, and I was cut off by a man in the middle of the trail with an axe. I hit him with a flashlight, and he fell over, and we ran down the hill. To be honest, I've never run so fast in memory. We heard more gunshots, and we eventually got down and ran to the property and packed up at 12 a.m. and got the hell out of there. We still frequently visit, but we're not going on any more hikes like that, especially at night. We were out with my brother's buddies getting high and drunk and trying to set up tents for the night when I hear a howl. I thought it was one of the girls who was coming to the party, so I howled back because I was high, and they howled again. I realized and said loudly, "That's not a person." We heard those howls from about 200 feet away. 10 seconds later, we heard it 40 feet away. Then we heard from all directions, yelping coyotes. We all sobered up for 10 seconds, and we all yelled, "Run!" I didn't know which tent to get to, so I saw one of my bro's friends, we'll call him Jerry, who dove into his tent. So as I ran to him, I screamed, "Jerry, close the effing tent!" His brother, let's call him Joey, rammed into my back and pushed the tent on the effing side, while by then it was closed and the coyotes were in our sight. So me, Jerry, and Connor were in a sideways tent, trying not to be sniffed out and possibly ripped up. It was 10:45 p.m. We waited till effing 6 a.m. to get out of the tent and see that the burgers, hot dogs, and the respective buns were all gone, and there were only scraps, along with piss on one of the tents. Being in a tent made for one with 3 people, scared and claustrophobic, with it being hot as F, was literal torture. So yeah, that's the scariest thing I saw and was part of in the woods. For me, being in the woods about every day, right next to a church cemetery and in old people's living apartments, I go through there when my mom is at work, and sometimes I'll go through to the cemetery since there is a pathway to it. One day, I had gotten my bag and walked out the door and went to the cemetery to chill out because I was already mad about something earlier that day. There is this tree in the furthermost right corner where I'm hidden from the watchers at Bojangles because this is on a main highway that runs through about 2 or 3 cities. I started hearing voices, and I was doing an Instagram live at the time, and the voices seemed to be getting closer, until, for the first time ever, I ditched out the woods faster than a weebo on the last day of school. Turns out, it was just the factory across the way, and it was closer to the cemetery than I thought. I went to a wilderness camp in Idaho when I was 17. We would drive vans to carry supplies like food, first aid, and miscellaneous. We had set up camp in this clearing, between a creek and the hillside. There were 2 backpacks left in the van, so I offered to go get them. The van was maybe 300 yards away. I grabbed 2 backpacks and start walking back, maybe halfway to the clearing. To my left, the hillside, I see a mountain lion looking at me like a basketball court's length from me. If you don't know Idaho, there's nothing but sagebrush. It was barely obscuring my vision, and I had to do a double take to confirm what the F I just saw. I lifted both backpacks on either side of my butt, got terrified, and ran back to the campsite. If I had to guess, it was probably just as scared of me as I was of it, but it's still the scariest thing that I've ever experienced. Another short story, while I was in Idaho, the land was a massive cattle grazing area. One morning, in our main campsite, the herd moved through our tent area, woke us all up. The newest kid was sleeping under a shitty tarp shelter, looked like a breeze could knock it over. The fattest, most ripped goddamn bull I've ever seen in my entire life stops next to his tarp shelter and does his loud-ass bull scream, whatever it's called. That kid's life probably flashed before his eyes. I was horrified, and I was watching this from like 100 feet away. My middle school had these woods right behind it, so when I ended up getting to school super early, I would explore the woods a bit and see what was there. I ended up finding a road along the way, and I noped the F out when I saw a house inside the woods and porcelain dolls outside near the front. Another time, I spotted a skunk waddling out of the bushes towards my direction. I didn't want to take any chances, so I noped the F out of there too before it could get closer to me. Another time, I saw a hiker. Nope the F out of there as well, because being a child alone in the woods already says enough. Children are weird. When I was around 7, I went with my brothers for a walk in the nearby forest. We were walking on a road in the middle of a forest when we saw a woman who was staring at us from between a tree. We thought nothing of it, but a while later the same woman was still staring at us and following us, hiding behind trees. We started to freak out. She was just staring at us with a faint smile while hiding in the woods. This is where we just started to scream and run. We managed to get out of the forest, and the woman was no longer there. I never saw this woman again, but this was one of the scariest experiences of my life.